Hey everyone, and welcome back to Cartel Files. My name is Adrian. And my job is to simplify laser design for you so you can start building your next project quicker. So in today's episode, we are going to design this. What it is a Thanksgiving table ornament. So you can see there's a base down here, and the bottom of the design will slot into that base, and it will sit nicely on your table for Thanksgiving. So what I'm going to do in this episode is actually show you two ways of designing this. The first way is going to be extremely fast, and the second way is going to be a more manual process, and it's going to just allow us to explore a few more tips and tricks and really understand how to use Corel Draw or any graphic design software in a bit more detail. So just for a bit of context, I found this image online. As you can see, it's quite a simple image, not a lot of detail and very simple colors. So basically what we're going to do for our first step is we're going to copy this image into a new document, paste it there, and we're going to go ahead and look at our first technique to design this. So what I'll do is I'll just make myself a bit smaller and zoom in. I want to click on the image, and while the image is clicked, there's an option up here called Trace Bitmap. Can you see that option? Once you click that, go down to Outline Trace and make sure you choose Detailed Logo. Okay, once you've done that, a little box will pop up here and it'll start processing. And what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and look at the image. So we're working with a JPEG image, just a normal pixel-based image. And then what it's going to do is try and convert that into a vector file. And that's what we're going to be using for our laser engraving and cutting. And by default, Corel Draw goes ahead and deletes this background color. You can see background color is set to remove in this option on the right. Okay, and we can play around with all these settings. You know, we can change the amount of colors in our design by just going to the colors tab, changing this number here to help simplify the image. And we can also play around with like the detailing and the smoothness of the final image. But if I just go ahead and press OK, you can see now we've got a vector file that we can blow up to any size that we want. And not lose any resolution and stuff like that. Now that is a vector file, it also means that we can go ahead and we can start editing the file. So if this was just a normal JPEG image, there's no way that I could, for example, ungroup all the elements, choose this feather here and change it to red, for example. It's just not possible with a pixel-based image. So that's what vector allows us to do. Another thing that we can do is if we go back to the original design, you can see what I've done is I've given everything a black outline and no fill. So if we go over here, we highlight everything and we right hand click on the black option up here in the top right. And then above it, there's an option to remove fill. I left click that and you can see we have a pretty good image right off the rip, right? So it's super easy. Now I can delete the parts that I don't need. I can go in here and spend some time cleaning up the design. You can see that there's quite a lot of waviness in some of the design. So it'll take up me a little bit of time to come in here. You can see a little bit more here that needs to be cleaned up. A little bit over here. The eyes need some work. So, you know, this will probably take me a good 10-15 minutes just to clean up. So this is a great way to move forward, right? If it's a more complex design, this can definitely save you some time. But what I want to do today is look at a different way that we can process this image. So let's paste that image back in here. Let's look at a different way we can process this image, which is definitely more manual. It's going to take a little bit longer time, but I feel like the end result will be much nicer, and we'll also learn a lot of different techniques along the way. So let's try that. So now that we've pasted the image into a new document, what I want to do is first click on it and head over to bitmaps, come down to mode, and choose this option here, grayscale 8-bit. Okay, and I think that just makes it a little bit nicer on the eyes, makes it easier in the video to see what I'm doing. But just in general, I tend to do this just because it can get a bit distracting with all the different colors. All right, so now that I've made it a grayscale image, what I want to do now is just give it a little bit of transparency so it's not as bold as you see here. And the way we do that is we just choose this option here, the transparency tool, click on that, and while you have your image selected, you can come up here and choose the uniform transparency option, and then that will just give it a transparency, just make it a little bit easier to see when we're starting to put lines on top of our design. Okay, if it doesn't look like this, if it's not as transparent as you like, you can adjust the transparency option up here. I have it at 50%. Go ahead and play around with it, see what works best for you. All right, then the last step is, because I'm going to be doing a lot of moving around and selecting, I don't want to accidentally move my image. Okay, so what I want to do is right-hand click it, and then come down to the option down here called lock. You see that? Lock. And that just locks that image in place. And now I can't accidentally move it or resize it or anything like that. Perfect. All right, so now we can get started. What I want to do is I want to start outlining everything, but typically what I see a lot of people doing is they grab the 3-point line tool and they just start tracing everything. And yes, that works, but I think that takes a lot of time. In some spots, we will definitely be using the 3-point line, but I think what you need to do is just take a little bit of a step back, look at the image and see what common shapes are in the image. So what I mean by that is, if we look at the top hat here, we can see that this is obviously a square with rounded corners. The brim of the hat, this is an elongated circle. This buckle here and this line here is, you know, a curved line and some squares. The head of the turkey looks to be a triangle with rounded corners. So we can start fleshing out all these designs and speed up the whole process instead of outlining everything by using some common shapes. And if in Cartel, if you have a look on the left-hand side, you've got these 3 options here. So you've got a rectangle tool, you've got an ellipse tool or a circle tool, and then you've got a polygon tool. And we'll get to that in a second, but the polygon tool is very, very helpful. So let's start with the hat. Okay, let's grab the rectangle tool and pull out a rectangle. Now, what I like to do is a lot of the times, you know, just I can eyeball things in terms of, you know, size and shape. But if I don't know the exact shape or size that I need to make my rectangle, for example, in this case for the hat, what I'll do is I'll head over to here and choose the parallel dimension tool. If you click and hold it, you can see there's a whole bunch of different options. Angular dimension is also a good one, but I'm going to use the parallel dimension tool in this case. And what I want to do is just zoom in a little bit on his hat, and I want to click on the left hand side and pull across until I get to the right hand side of his hat. Okay, and then when I let go, you can see it's going to give me a number, and this number represents obviously the width of the hat. Now in this case, you know, it doesn't really matter if the square is 14.61 millimeters or if it's 14.6. We can get away with it. It's, you know, a very artistic design. But if we're, you know, working with something that's a bit more you know, maybe a perspective image or something that has to be like a mechanically fitting part, that can be really useful to find out exactly what this size or this part of the image is. So 14.6. So let's select our rectangle, choose 14.61 if we want to get very specific. And to make it a square, I'll also have my height the same. So I'm just changing that value here. 14.61 right there. Cool. Now what I want to do is, you can see my square does not match up with the angle of the hat. So if I just increase the thickness of this line so it's a bit more obvious when I'm designing this, what I want to do is place the square roughly where I want to, you know, be, and then I want to rotate the square into place. So I can click on the square a second time, and that gives me these different handles. You can see here, if I place my mouse over it, it shows you that you can rotate the rectangle. And the rectangle will always, or any shape, will always rotate about this center point. And we'll get back to that later. But that center point we can move. By default, it's always in the center of whatever object we have. But if we, for example, wanted to move that center point and place it at the bottom left-hand node, now when I rotate my design, it'll rotate around that point. Okay, but in this case, we want it in the center. So let's leave it the way it is. And now try and match that angle that we see here. So I think we're pretty much there. We want to move the hat down, or the rectangle down, so it matches the top of the hat. Okay, and now what we want to do is we want to round these edges. So the way we do that is, if we come up here, you see there's a corner radius option. What we're going to do is just click on the up arrow here, and we're watching the edge of the design here until that radius matches the image that we see there. So I'm going to hold that down, and we're going to get, when we get close, we can just do single clicks, and that looks about right to me. So there we go. We've got our nice square all fleshed out. Okay, now we can just continue designing the rest of our design. So now I want to grab our ellipse tool. All right, and I want to pull out a long flat circle, something like this. Again, I'll make that a bit thicker so we can see it better. And I want to move that circle roughly in place where we need it. It needs to be a little bit longer. And again, if I click it a second time, these new handles come up, and I can rotate it into place. All right, and you can see just by eye that was pretty close, but we need to make it a bit larger. And we need to make it a bit thicker. So we can just play around with these settings until we get it just right. You can play around with those handles. Another way you can also do it is, if you come up here and you choose the shape tool, the shortcut is F10 on your keyboard. You can click that, right-hand click on the circle, and change it to a curve. See that? Convert to a curve. And when you do that, you now have 4 nodes that you can play around with. So there's one on the 2 ends, as well as the top and the bottom. So now what I can do is I zoom in, I place that node where I want it. Same on this side. Okay, and then we can pull these nodes down and this node up, and we have a nice shape ready to go. So again, just a quicker way of doing things. Okay, so now that we have these 2 objects, we want to delete any of the lines that we don't need. So we don't need this line from the square. So I'm going to come over here and choose the virtual segment delete tool. Okay, if it's not shown on your toolbox, it may be under the crop tool. So it may show as a crop tool. Click and hold that and come down to virtual segment delete. Okay, and we just want to delete that line there by selecting it. Perfect. Now we can come in here. Again, we could make this out of a rectangle, but I actually just noticed that this has a slight curve to it to make it look like it's wrapping around a circle. So the best option would be the 3-point curve tool. All right, and we select that point there, select that point there, and we make sure that that line matches that curve nicely. Then we can come in here. Again, we can just use a square. And we'll make that roughly 1.4 by 1.4 millimeters. Rotate that to an angle that looks about right. And we again want to make this a bit thicker for viewing purposes. And rotate that square into place. That looks about right. I will use the shape tool and convert this to a curve by selecting it, right hand clicking, convert to curve, and then grabbing these nodes and just placing them where they need to be. Okay. Making sure that the bottom lines are overlapping and it looks like it's in perspective. So you may need to just play around with that, but that looks about right to me. Then I will copy and paste that, make a new line. So again, just trying to reduce the amount of steps that I'm doing in designing this. Okay. And what we want to do now is remove this line that's crossing through our buckle. And we want to give this a slight fillet on the top surface. So I just noticed that it's not quite as square as I'd like. I'd pull that in just a little bit more. And same on this side. That looks nice. And we can now use a new tool that we haven't used on the channel yet, and that's called the fillet tool. So the fillet tool allows us to curve certain lines. So I'm going to choose the outer box, and we can go up to Window, and then scroll down to Dockers, and click on Corners, this option here. And that opens this new window on the right hand side. Okay, and we want to make sure that the fillet is selected and our radius is an appropriate number. So in this case, that's going to be huge. We probably want about 0.5 of a millimeter. Hit apply, and you can see that that's rounded those corners nicely. And that looks pretty good to me. So that's the fillet tool. I think that comes in handy quite a lot. And the last step I want to do is probably just delete these nodes at the bottom here and break apart this node and this node, which means we can delete this line here. Now with that done, I will just extend these nodes down until they touch the bottom line, and we should be done with the hat. So I think that looks really good. We can go over to our objects panel and turn off our image, so we have just a clear view of what the hat looks like, and I think that looks pretty good. Now for me, what I always do is I select my object now that I've finished designing it and press Ctrl G to group that object. Okay, and then you can see it in the object panel, 5 individual objects now grouped as one. So that just helps reduce the amount of different objects in our object panel on the right hand side. Perfect. So now let's have a look at fleshing out that head shape. So the head is, as I said, it looks more like a triangle with rounded corners, like really big radius. So what I want to do is, in order to make a triangle, I want to head over to the polygon tool here, okay, and make sure I select polygon. You could also do it with common shapes, but I tend to use the polygon tool. There's no really right or wrong way to do this, but click on polygon and create a polygon. By default, it'll give you a pentagon, so something with 5 sides, and that is controlled by this option here. So if I click 4, it'll give me a diamond, and then if I go down to 3, it'll give me a triangle. Beautiful. So now what I want to do is just make that triangle roughly, by eye, roughly the right size. And then what I want to do is use our fillet tool again. Okay, so we can come over, click on our fillet tool on the right hand side here, and this time instead of a 0.5mm radius, let's try a 5mm radius. Hit apply, and whoa, that's way too big. Maybe a 1mm radius, that's too small. Let's try a 3mm radius, and maybe that'll work. Let's try. So again, I'm going to rotate that triangle to the shape that to the angle that I think is about right. Then resize it using the other handles, the main scale handles, and try and get that to match up as best as I can. So I think we've pretty much nailed the radius. We can just play around with it a little bit to get it in the perfect place, but I think that looks fine. And now we just want to delete the lines that we don't need. So we don't need any of these lines that go up into the hat section. So I'm just using that virtual segment delete tool again, and now we've fleshed out that that head shape. Now what we can do is start working on the eyes, and this would definitely be something that I would either use the ellipse tool on to create a circle, and then we can adjust it by converting it to a curve, or we could just simply draw this using the 3-point curve tool. So maybe I'll do one eye with 3-point curve and the other eye with the ellipse, and just you can choose which one makes more sense to you. So what I'm doing is I select the 3-point curve tool, I choose a point at the bottom here, come up, sort of 75–80% the way up through the first part of the curve, and then I find where I can lay that line so that it gives me that nice curve that I'm looking for. Then I want to make sure that when I continue on the curve, that I'm coming here and I'm clicking on this node here. Can you see that? So the end of the line will have a node. I'm going to click on that and come across to roughly the same spot on the other side of the eye, and then just find that point where that'll fit. Choose that node point again, and then come down to the bottom and draw the rest of the eye. Now I'll do the same in real time, how I would be working for the inner part of the eye. Okay, so you can see basically how fast you can do this once you've got your rhythm. And then the other eye, we can do that with a circle. So let's pull out a circle. Make it a bit thicker so we can see it. Right hand click, convert to curves, and then choose our shape tool here. Okay, and then just basically move the nodes into place so that we can then start playing around with how we want the curve to look. So you can see that there's these handles on each of the nodes. Okay, so if I choose this node, I can then move the handles in order to change the shape of the curve. And typically in cases like this, I'll need to have a different amount of curve on each of the nodes, and I'll show you what that means in a second. But typically, if I'm using this type of node, which is a smooth node, it's going to be symmetrical and adjust the shape of the curve on the upper and the lower side. So what I can do if I don't want that is I can right hand click and come down to this option here, cusp. And that just means that I can have a different value for the upper side. So you can see as I move this around, I can adjust the upper side of the curve irrespective to the bottom. So I'm just going to move that into roughly where it needs to be. Same with this side. Okay, I choose this one and I change that to a cusp as well. And I adjust that part of the curve. And I make this part a little bit smoother, and we can play around with what that looks like by playing with the length of the arrows or the length of the handles. And there you go. I didn't do a great job of following the shape of that, but you can get the idea. You know, you can play around with it and get it exactly how you like. Then, you know, you can do the same thing for the inside. So I'll just make a smaller version of this. And you can see that this is a little bit of a little bit more fiddling around, but in some cases it can help. You know, there's some cases where this is the preferred method, but in this case I probably would go with the 3-point curve tool. I would also probably need to cut off the bottom of this, so I will make a line here using the 3-point curve tool, and then you can delete all those portions. And you're left with something that looks roughly the same. You know, as I said, I prefer the 3-point curve tool, but if it's a more complex shape, maybe the second way that we did that is a better option. All right, so we can see that there's these little flicks that come off the eye. I guess they're, you know, eyelashes or something. Let's draw those in. So that's just using that 3-point curve tool again. And I just draw that in like that. Now let's do the mouth section, or the beak of the turkey. So I'd probably break it up into a few different lines. Okay, and the reason for that is just to make sure that we are hitting all of the spots that we want to, making sure we're overlapping all of the different lines. So in this case, we don't. So I'm clicking that inner eye and just making sure that that node is overlapping. It actually looked like we did in the end. So that looks great. Let's continue by doing the inside portion. Okay. And then the bottom of the beak. We probably need to break that up as well. I always tend to just do the bottom of a curve separately. It just allows us to get a nicer transition. You can see if I tried to do this all in one hit, it'll be, you know, it doesn't match the design as well. So I kind of go, you know, sort of 75% the way there, do the bottom portion so I can make that curve nice and smooth, and then finish up there. And I have a little bit of a bump here, so it's where this node kind of comes in a bit too much, and it has this sort of little dent, maybe you can call it. And what I do is I just click on that node there, and then I come up here and I just choose this option, smooth node. And when I do that, it pulls that line in and it makes it nice and smooth, that transition. So that's looking pretty good. The last thing we need to do is we need to draw in this little thing. I don't know what it's called. And that is a circle for sure. All right, let's make that a bit thicker and place that roughly where we want. Click it a second time and we can rotate it in place and just massage that positioning so it looks about right. All right, so we can see that this shape has to be over the neckline, so we can just delete that line there, and that'll give us that nice design look. All right, let's head over and now group all of the face objects so that now we have that all grouped, and we can turn off the background and have a look at our design. And I think that looks pretty good, right? If we were to engrave that as is, I don't see any issues with how that looks. Cool. Let's continue now with the neck. So I'm definitely going to use the 3-point curve here. I just want to follow that curve as best as I can. Make that a bit thicker, and we can come down to this point here. Do the same over here. Make that a bit thicker. Bring it down to roughly here, where you can see that the curve starts becoming a little bit more sharper, and then continue on from that point there to the shoulder part. Now we just want to delete these extra lines that we don't need, and I think that looks pretty good. Let's turn that image off. Yeah, that looks pretty smooth, pretty nice. All right, cool. So now what we can do is fill in this body section using a circle. So I'm going to pull out a circle that's roughly the right shape, and we can play around with the scale handles just to get that a little bit closer to what we're looking for. And here's a good example of, you know, we can play around with the circle as much as we want in this state, but it's just never going to fit to the shape of the body of the turkey. So this is an exact reason why I showed you the second option for the eye, converting it to a curve and playing around with the shape of the circle, because, you know, as I said, this is quite close to a circle, but it's not an exact circle. So I'm going to select that circle, right hand click, and come up to the option here, convert to curve. Now we can click on the shape tool, and we can come in here and start playing with the shape. Now, one thing that I haven't shown you is, you know, if I convert this to a curve, it's going to have 4 nodes that we can manipulate, but you can actually add or remove additional nodes. So I can just right hand click on the line and click the option add here, and that'll give me another node where I can grab that and alter the shape of the curve. Okay, and I can do it again over here, add, grab that node and pull it out. And now that seems to be fitting much nicer. May need to bring this up a little bit so we have a bit of overlap, and play with these handles to just bring that shape in a little bit. And yeah, that looks pretty nice. And that was super quick to do, much faster than tracing that out individually. So now what we want to do is come in here and just make sure that our lines for the neck is overlapping here and over here. And that'll allow us to delete this section here in the middle. Perfect. So once again, we can turn that image off, and you can see that that looks very nice and smooth. Perfect. Let's continue by doing the hands or the wings. I think for me, looking at this, we could definitely do it as a circle, but it would be much faster as the 3-point curve tool. I would just basically follow this around Oops. Just like that. All right, again, breaking up that curve so we can really follow it so it looks like the original image. And we have, really smooth transitions. Do the same thing over here. Once you've practiced this a bit, it's super quick. We can get these things drawn pretty fast. And you don't have to spend a lot of time getting it exactly right because it's a drawing after all. It's not a technical sketch or something like that where there's perspective and stuff like that. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Cool. So now we've done the wings and the body. Probably before we move on to anything else, I just want to finish off the pattern here on its neck and this little fluffy feather piece in the middle of its chest. So again, I wouldn't even attempt this with any shapes. I think that's a waste of time. I would just come straight up to the 3-point curve tool and start drawing this out. So something like this. I would probably break up each of the curves here into 2 sections. I wouldn't try and get that all designed in one curve. So just sort of selecting the middle of the curve. So you can see how it curves here. I select roughly about the middle section and create a line there. And then from that point up, I come to the end of that curve and just smooth that out. So I can just quickly follow that around super fast. And we're almost there. Oops. Right here. And lastly to there. Cool. So now let's finish this section here on its chest. We can do the same as what we did for the neck. Break it up when it needs it. Like this just would not work. And follow that design as best as we can. Perfect. Let's have a look. That looks all right. I probably want to just fix up this node a bit, make it a bit more smoother. Same here. Smooth that node out a bit. I think it's just a little bit too sharp. And there we go. That is looking very nice. Last thing, or actually second last thing we need to do is the tail section, and then we'll finish up with the ball or the pumpkin, whatever this is that he's sitting on. And the tail section, I'll probably measure that once again. So I'm going to come over to my parallel dimension tool, select that, and head over to one of these tail feathers. So I'll grab the dimension of this one, and it looks to be about 12.2 or 12.25 millimeters. So let's make a square, or a long rectangle, I should say, and make the width of that up here 12.25 millimeters. And what I want to do is to get this rounded edge that you see at the top of the feathers. I want to come up to my corner radius, and we know the width of the rectangle is 12.25 millimeters. So let's choose in the corner radius. Let's write in 12.25. And then what we can do is actually write in an expression. So we'll do the divide by symbol and then type the number 2. So 12.25 divided by 2. When I press enter, you'll see that it now creates a perfectly smooth transition at the top of the rectangle, and it's automatically calculated 6.125 as the radius. Perfect. So what we need to do now is just place our rectangle, and I might just make this a bit thicker and change the color so it's a bit easier for you to see what I'm doing. But yeah, that basically will place that rectangle exactly where we need it. We can now copy and paste that rectangle, and I showed you in the beginning that we could change where this center point is. What I want to do is click on this center point and bring it all the way down and choose that node in the middle there, okay, to drop it. Now what that means is when I rotate the feather, it'll rotate around that bottom section there. Okay, and we can copy and paste and continue to rotate around, copy, paste, rotate around, copy, paste, and rotate around. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't like the way that that spacing looks. Let's just quickly turn everything else off so we can have a clear view of what we're doing. I don't really like this. It'll probably be okay if you didn't have the image as a reference, but since we do, let's not work this way. Okay, you can also see that the image, or the feathers I should say, in the image are different sizes. It gets smaller at the bottom, but this is definitely a way that we can design different elements using that sort of rotate function that you saw. But in this case, I think the right way forward is the 3-point curve tool. I can choose that first section, come up about 75% of the way, follow that curve around. Okay, and then we can just come across to probably to the end of that line. Yep, and we can drop a line just like that. Find where these points intersect, come about 75% of the way, drop that line there, and come to the end of that point and continue that all the way around the outside of the turkey. So I'm going to quickly do that, and I'll catch up once that's all done. Okay, that took me probably about 45 seconds to a minute to do that. Now what I want to do is come on in and do these smaller feathers here. So I'll fast forward through this as well, and I'll just quickly get that all sorted. Okay, so I've finished outlining all of that. So now what I probably want to do is in my object panel on the right hand side, choose all of these curves, and we want to group them. So now we have the whole body section all grouped. And now what we've got left is just to do this pumpkin or ball that the turkey's sitting on. So again, what I would do is probably pull out a big circle, try and get the shape just right, like so, and delete any of the lines we don't need, so we don't need that top part there. And we can now come in and draw the sections here. I would do one big sweeping curve, just like that. Make sure that we are selecting the top line here and the bottom line, making sure that they overlap. And just follow that curve like so. And I'll come back in and just give all those lines the right thickness that we need. So we want those all to be 0.2. Perfect. So now if I turn the image off, you can see we've got our perfectly drawn turkey. And if we look at the original that I've designed, you can see that we've got some gray fill here. The eyes are filled in black, and we've got a cut line on the outside here, and all the inside lines are set to black for engraving. So let's do that with our current design. So the way we do that is just select everything, and in the top right hand corner, right hand click on the black option. That turns all the lines black. And what we want to do is fill in these lines with some gray. So I'm going to come over here to my Smart Fill tool. See that option there? And with that option selected, we can come up here and we can choose a color, a gray color. That was a fluke. 199, 199, 199 RGB. And we can then just fill in those lines. Oops. We have a gap down here. So when I chose that option there, it filled everything in. So let's just quickly fix that. And we just do that by making sure those two nodes are touching each other. Back to the Smart Fill tool and fill that in. And that looks good. Now, the last thing we want to do is fill in the eyes. So we can go back over here and select a black color and fill in those eyes. Again, we have an issue where the lines have an overlapping problem. So I just want to select this eye, and remember we've grouped this all these objects, so we need to ungroup them. Select this the eye, double click, and just make sure that these nodes are exactly touching the other line, just like that. And I thought I did that the first time, but obviously not well enough. And now we can fill that in. Perfect. So now all those curves that were together, we can group those again. And everything else, we can group all of that stuff together as well. Perfect. So now the last thing we need to do is give it a cut line for the outside of the image. And we do that by selecting the design, then coming up to Effects and choose the option Contour. You see that? Contour. The default hotkey is Control F9 for that. So choose that. And what we're going to see now is all of this grayed out. And the reason for that is this needs to be a single curve, and it's not at the moment. So let's head back over to our objects, select everything. We do that by clicking on the first object, holding down Shift, and then selecting the bottom object. So all of these are now selected. We can come over here and we can say ungroup all objects. And now we have the option to combine all of these. Now, before I click combine, we're going to have an issue where, for example, this filled in eye will disappear. The fill in for this ball as well. So what I want to do is just select those individual items and press Control X to cut them, and we'll paste them back in once we've combined all this design. So I'm going to select everything and come up here and press combine. And now that combines everything, and I can press Control V to copy those options back in. If I try to do it all together, it'll just combine it and remove all the filling, and we'll lose those that detail. But now that it's all one design, I can select everything and grab our contour again. And now we can type in an offset. So the offset I'm going to say is about 3 millimeters. We want to make sure it's selected as an outside contour, rounded corners, and we can give it an outline of red for cutting. Hit apply, and you can see one of the annoying issues with Corel Draw is it fills in everything, but we just want the outside line only. So what we'll do is right hand click on that line and press break contour apart. All right, and that now breaks the contour apart from the outline design that we have. And we can come in and just delete all of these lines that we don't need. Unfortunately, that's just how Corel works. I wish you could just do an outline only option, but it doesn't work like that. If you have a workaround or a better way of doing this, please let me know in the comments below. Let's just delete all of that. And now you can see we've got a nice design with a cut line on the outline. And the last thing we need to do is design the base and the pin at the bottom of this design to fit into the base. So let's pull out a shape roughly about that size. I usually just do it by eye. If it's very critical, I would move into a 3D design software like Fusion 360 to make sure that what I'm designing is going to physically fit together. I have a video on that, so you can watch it up there. But what I want to do now is, because I know this is going to be made out of 3 millimeter material, I want to make this design, or the pin, 3 millimeters in width. So the width of this needs to be 3 millimeters to match the material that I'm making. And I'll just, I guess, come up with a width that looks about right. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to choose the width to be 20 millimeters. So I'm going to type that in, and the height of this slot to be 3 millimeters to match the material. I can then select the outer curve, press E to center it, the slot, center it vertically, and C to center it horizontally. Then I'm going to grab that same curve, bring it up, and choose the midpoint node and find the midpoint of the top part of the design. Okay, and this should actually be a hairline, so we can cut it. And I just want to make sure that those two lines overlap, and we can delete that and combine that bottom slot with the rest of the curve by coming up here and pressing combine. That is now a finished design. There you go. I will just group those objects once again, and then we can center those to each other. Perfect. So that was 2 ways of designing this object. As I said, the first way, we can do that really quite simply by just using the outline trace tool. But then there's a lot of cleanup work. If we did it this way, you can see that it's a lot more manual process, but you know, there's a lot of good tips and tricks you can learn by doing these things manually that allows you to be a better designer in the future. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe down below. It really helps us grow the channel and keep making free content for you every week. If you want this design, it'll be available on cartelfiles.com. The link will be in the description below. please go there, download the file. It's completely free. Make one for yourself. And if you want to take a photo of it and send it in, maybe we can feature it in our next video. The email address you can send your photos to is hello@cartelfiles.com. Happy Thanksgiving, and I'll see you in the next video.